tightening the screws, so to speak, with their sanctions against Cuba and Venezuela. And they're seeking regime change. The empire is seeking regime change clearly in Cuba and in Venezuela, particularly in Venezuela, where the challenges are deeper. We we are in a situation where all the pre-existing problems of our condition of underdevelopment have become exacerbated, become worse by what is in fact a metaphoric economic bloodbath. Revenues are falling very sharply. In some countries in the Caribbean and certainly in the OECS, you find revenues falling by as much as 50%, maybe more. May, which has just finished here, revenues for the government in St. Vincent and Grenadines fell by 18%. A lot of people are unemployed, a lot of real social disruption. We had for the first part of this year, in fact, just ended, beginning of June, the worst drought we have had in 50 years. And agriculture has been affected terribly. Then we had COVID, and of course, remaining after the end of this period, you know, as soon as June the 1st came, June the 1st was the day when we marked the new hurricane season, and this hurricane season is going to be above average in an active scenario. Now, when you take into account the fall in revenues on agricultural production, what has happened with services generally, all economic activity in the period of the pandemic, and then the resources which have to be spent in this period of the natural disasters following the hurricanes and storms. Our hands are really full, and we don't have anywhere to look out other than to ourselves, basically. This is the challenge which we're facing in the Eastern Caribbean. We have a central bank, and that is providing some cushion, but not a great deal. We have the Caribbean Development Bank. It's not so capitalized to get the kind of resources that you would like to have. And there are some supportive monies from the IMF, 100% of our quota of this special drawing rights, but because the extent of our drawing rights is fairly small, it's not a lot of money. And then you can get some support from the World Bank, particularly if you're an IDA, International Development Association country. And the debts have to be paid. You would have noticed that one country in the Eastern Caribbean so far, St. Lucia, had to miss the salary deadline in the month of May. And proposals have been made that part of public servants' salaries and police officers and teachers and nurses, part of the salary should be paid in bonds. More than one country in CARICOM is talking in those terms. So it's an extremely difficult period. I don't speak of it in terms of a crisis because a crisis is a condition in which the principals are innocent of the extent of the condition and have no idea as to the way forward. So, and we are not innocent. We don't know all how it is going to pan out completely because the depth and breadth of this particular socioeconomic matter is still to be finally realized. I hear a number of predictions between 5% and 7 and 10% and 15% and 20% contraction of economies. The truth is this, it depends on what assumptions you put into these economic models. And depending on the assumptions, you may as well consult astrology as much as the science of economics. So there is where we are. Unfortunately, we don't have the strength. ALBA does not have the strength that it had hitherto, but we still have ourselves. And we have to reach out and hold each other's hands and to see how we can assist doctors and nurses and the like. Indeed, I understand that Italy is proposing Cuba to receive the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize, because of its remarkable work. And I want to congratulate the Italian government for making that submission. And I again want to say thanks to the Cuban government and people. And we all should support this particular initiative by Italy. In the midst of all what is taking place, we see in the United States the contradictions growing sharper on the racial front. And we have to work with persons who are neglected and dispossessed in North America and Cuba and Europe. And that means working hand in glove with the forces that represented, the progressive forces, including the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, this is a moment in history of great significance. And I am urging that all of us in ALBA, we do not get despondent, we don't have lamentations, that we look optimistically at what we can do together and to see what is possible in relation to trade, what assistance as the countries open up again, as to what assistance is possible for all of us to work together in matters of air transportation and shipping, in addition to the traditional areas of cooperation in education and health and the like. It is a testing period for us in our respective countries and for ALBA. And I'm urging that we stay alert, do not give up, and work with one another much better than we have done thus far, so that we can continue to strengthen our bonds of solidarity, of complementarity, to see if we can give meaning in this new period to the vision as set out by persons such as Fidel and Hugo Chavez. Be assured always that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is this government and the Unity Labour Party. We remain steadfast. This year, we're going to have general elections in our country sometime before the end of the year. And you can expect that an attempt would be made by imperialism. They're already at work to try to see if they can get rid of this government, but it's not going to be so easy, because we have a deep connection with the working people, the poor, the dispossessed, the middle class, the supporter cause, all groups. But they were going to seek to see if they can take out St. Vincent and the Grenadines. They would have weakened ALBA further. And that's why we have to be resolute with one another and hold out our hands in friendship and do things in practical ways to keep neocolonialism and imperialism at bay and build a better world, because we know it is possible. And in the midst of this pandemic, I want to thank Nicholas for initiating the hosting of this meeting. Thank you.
Tienen pendiente, estamos en un periodo de prueba.
We are at a trying period, so to speak.
Te digo, Ralph,
let me tell you that
mucha gente apostó desde los medios de derecha, desde los medios de comunicación del imperialismo, desde sus voceros, que no íbamos a poder, que no íbamos a poder. Y hemos demostrado los países del ALBA y los gobiernos del ALBA que sí podemos. Sí podemos. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Sí se puede. Sí se puede. Y hemos salido adelante. Nosotros tuvimos aquí 12 semanas de cuarentena radical.
12 weeks of absolute lockdown, guaranteeing health for our people, guaranteeing peace of mind to our people. And during those 12 weeks, we faced conspiracies, persecutions of the U.S. administration that prevented any tankers to get to our shores. And we made great efforts, and we demonstrated that we were able to face this. On May the 13th, we had to face a terrorist incursion, and here we are prevailing and defending our peace and our sovereignty. Brothers and sisters of the Caribbean, I indulge your patience, and let me do this comment. We have demonstrated the solidarity, the strength, and the unity of ALBA. We regret what happened in St. Lucas. They have not been able to pay the salaries of their population. But if the St. Lucas were part of ALBA, they would have been able to pay all their public services, because we would have never let them alone. And the right compelled St. Lucia's to get out of ALBA, and Trump Empire, who made pressure on St. Lucia's, he did not help them. They let him alone. This is the truth. So, for the truth, Christ died, and for the truth, we will live. And the Caribbean knows this. ALBA is a guarantee of unity, of support. We will now give the floor to another courageous man, outstanding young leader of the Caribbean, Roosevelt Skerritt. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you very much. I want to greet all of you, comrades, and to say to the President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, my dear friend and brother, President Nicolas Maduro, I would have loved to have been at the Miraflores, embracing you and our comrades in Venezuela with the hosting of this ALBA summit. But circumstances have caused us to meet by virtual means, nonetheless. I would wish to say to you, Comrade President, that the Commonwealth of Dominica continues to stand in absolute solidarity with your administration, your leadership, and with the people of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. I want to say to our Comrade President of the Republic of Cuba, a country that continues to be persecuted by the United States unjustly, that we in Dominica continue to stand in absolute solidarity with the revolutionary government of the Republic of Cuba. And we place on public record our condemnation of the terrorist attack on your embassy facilities in Washington. We would have hoped that countries who espouse a particular view on terrorism would have been among the first to come forward to condemn terrorism against the people of Cuba. But we are not surprised by the silence of some. This is the MO, the modus operandi. This, I believe, was one of the reasons why it's premised on, but in difficult times. Last 16 or so years of the formation of ALBA, great adversity. We could speak of the global financial crisis, which lasted for a pretty long time from 2008. We could speak also of the oil crisis and the many natural disasters which we have had to confront as individual nations within the ALBA family. But we've also had to confront attacks from various countries on our own situations, our own situations in our respective countries. And Prime Minister Comrade Ralph Gonsalves has referenced the fact that there are already signs of attacks coming outside in lead up to his own elections in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We, as you know, as you saw, we experienced that kind of attack, which has been exposed also in Venezuela and other sister ALBA countries. But I have no doubt that the people of St. Vincent and Grenadines will continue to recognize the outstanding and important leadership of the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the Unity Labour Party of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we in Dominica, we shall stand in solidarity with the Unity Labour Party of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the leadership of Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves. This pandemic, as we've all recognized, have placed tremendous challenges on our nations. But as progressive governments, we have always placed and continue to place our people first and our own survival first. And so we have all taken actions to ensure that our people who are the most exposed to the effects of this pandemic are probably ALBA nations. And we have seen a remarkable recovery of those persons who would have been impacted or affected by COVID-19.
And I think it speaks to the core and the foundation of our existence as ALBA nations. As I've said, we've always placed people's livelihoods and people's lives at the center of what we have done and what we continue to do. And our remarkable success with the fight against COVID-19 is testament to this effort. We have also seen attempts by countries to undermine multilateralism in a time when multilateralism is so very important. There's no way where any one of our countries could fight COVID-19 on our own. And for countries to want to undermine and to derail the efforts, of example, of the World Health Organization, at a time when the World Health Organization is so needed, is extraordinary. There are now attempts to even undermine the efforts of the Pan-American Health Organization. And I can say to you, my dear comrades, that had it not been for the Pan-American Health Organization, countries like ours in the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States would have found it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to access much needed pharmaceuticals and PPEs to fight COVID-19. And there is a political movement which we have to confront and fight off with regards to the attacks now on the Pan-American Health Organization. I want to place also on record that a country like Venezuela, with all of its economic challenges that have been caused by the unjust sanctions placed on Venezuela by the United States government, you have continued to live the true spirit of Simon Bolivar and the true spirit of our dear comrade, President Hugo Chavez. And notwithstanding your own challenges, you have been able to reach out to countries like ours in the OECS with PPEs and testing capabilities so as to enhance our fight against COVID-19. We are eternally touched by your continued solidarity in the face of your own challenges. You have been able to share with us. And I also want to recognize the extraordinary contributions of the Republic of Cuba with the provision of medical and nursing professionals. Every one of our countries has benefited from this contribution of the Cuban government and its people. And you are facing, as a nation, one of your most difficult periods, not caused by your own self, but caused by external factors. And yourself as a country has to confront COVID-19. But you have been able to reach out to countries far and near by providing us with one of the basic elements needed to fight COVID-19, the human resources. Trained doctors, trained nurses, trained lab technicians to assist us in the testing for COVID-19. And so this meeting, I believe, President Maduro, is timely. We have heard the report from our friend from ECLAC, who has highlighted the challenges which COVID-19 have brought upon our countries. And so I believe with complementarity, with solidarity, with us working together, we can certainly overcome these challenges. These challenges are not daunting. And I think we have to face it head on, but we have to face it as a united people, a united ALBA, a united world. And I believe ALBA has demonstrated its capacity, its ability to overcome challenges. And we have been able to do so because of an expression in a tangible way. We have been able to overcome these challenges because we have always stood with each other in difficult periods, and we shall continue to do so in the face of COVID-19. So we again want to, I know time is of the essence, so I will not want to speak much longer, but just to say to you, President Nicolas Maduro, and all my comrades here present, that Dominica will continue, and we shall continue to stand and to speak publicly and loudly against efforts to undermine legitimate governments, legitimate political infrastructures in our countries, and to deny us of our right to self-determination. And we look forward to meeting each other in person very soon, once we would have seen the worst part of COVID-19. But we send you our love, our affection, and our sincere friendship and solidarity. And I want to commend the leadership of your respective countries, you know, for the efforts that you have made. You know, I speak here of the heroic leadership of Prime Minister Gaston Brown and of Antigua and Barbuda, and Prime Minister Gonzalez, and our friends in Nicaragua, and of course our brothers in Cuba and Venezuela. So I'm very happy to be in this meeting, and I look forward to meeting, not by this virtual means, but certainly I'm coming to visit the great nation of Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chairman.
Very soon we will meet again here in Caracas.
Muy
Roosevelt. Very
pronto,
soon.
Roosevelt, seguro, muy pronto.
We're going to be together
Estaremos juntos
again,
otra vez
making
avanzando
progress,
acciones en este
taking
siglo XXI.
action.
Ya vamos por el año
In the
2020.
21st century. We are
El ALBA
already at the
conmemoró sus 15
2020
años en
year.
La Habana en
ALBA
diciembre pasado.
celebrated its 15th
Ahora en el mes de
anniversary in
junio se
Havana
cumplen
last
15
December.
años de
And
Petrocaribe.
in June we will celebrate 15
Sí se
years of
puede,
the
lo hemos
creation of
demostrado.
Petrocaribe.
Y a
So,
pesar de la
yes, we can. We have
persecución
demonstrated this.
energética,
And in spite of
financiera, comercial,
all the persecution in the
a pesar de
energy,
que Donald Trump
financial
pretenda poner sus
spheres,
rodillas
in
sobre el
spite of the
cuello de
fact
Petrocaribe
that Donald
y de
Trump
Venezuela,
wants to put
no
his
podrán
kneel
asfixiarnos,
on
no
the
podrán con
Venezuelan
nosotros,
and the Caribbean
bajo
neck,
ninguna
they will not
circunstancia, la
prevail.
rodilla de
Under
Donald
any
Trump podrá asfixiar
circumstances,
y matar
Donald
la
Trump's
idea
knee
maravillosa
is going to be
de
able
Bolívar, de
to
Martínez,
destroy
de
the
Chávez,
wonderful
jamás
ideas of
Powell.
Martí, of Bolivar,
Tenemos
of
al
Chavez.
Gaston Brown.
Now we will give the floor to Gaston
Este sí es un
Brown.
especialista en
He
finanzas
is an expert
y en economía.
in finance and economy
De Antigua y Barbuda.
from
Este
Antigua
sí
and
es un
Barbuda. He
especialista.
is
Vamos
a
a escucharlo.
real
Adelante,
expert.
Gaston
You
Brown.
have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and a special good afternoon to all of my ALBA colleagues. Certainly a pleasure to be part of this meeting. I want to thank the President for convening this very important meeting of ALBA. We're certainly gathering at a very challenging period, and it's a time for us to exercise an even greater level of solidarity among members of ALBA. Clearly, COVID would have exposed a number of our vulnerabilities to include the fact that some of the members of ALBA are actually highly dependent on tourism. And now that we have had a curtailment element of tourists coming to our shores by the virtual closure of our border, one of the most tourism-dependent countries, and we have a reduction in revenue 70%. I mean, that is enough to bankrupt any country. And as a consequence, we had to take certain actions to reopen it as quickly as possible in order to, let's say, mitigate to some extent the economic carnage that is likely to happen as a consequence of the closure of our borders. Now, we have a lot to celebrate within this region, the ALBA region. The fact that we have been able to contain COVID to the extent that we only account for about 0.17% of infections and of the deaths only 0.08. So clearly, notwithstanding all the challenges that we are faced with, the sanctions on two of our member countries, as well as the economic effects of COVID, we have been able to control the spread of COVID within our respective countries. And we ought to celebrate those successes in terms of us controlling the spread of COVID and would reduce the amount of fatalities. And again, I believe part of the success has to do with the level of cooperation among ALBA countries. And I certainly want to take the opportunity to thank President Maduro for the assistance that ALBA in test kits and other PPEs with various member states of ALBA. I also want to thank the President of Cuba for sharing with us expertise. We have a number of Cuban officials here, nurses and doctors who are trained in infectious disease control, and they are now part of our arsenal as we seek to position ourselves now for the, let's say, second wave of COVID. And again, that is the level of cooperation that is required, not only in the field of health, but certainly as far as economic aspect is concerned. We need to also heighten our level of cooperation. Whereas I do accept we do not have a lot of financial resources, I believe that we can continue to share expertise just as we did in the health aspect of COVID to deal with the challenges, the health challenge. Now, I believe it's a lesson in that all of us need to add issues of food security in a serious way, as well as food sovereignty. Generally speaking, to make our countries sustainable, make our countries more resilient. And I believe that in some of the countries, the expertise that can be shared to help us to increase production in the productive sectors of our economies, that we can become less reliant on the importation of goods, and at the same time to ensure we can deal with issues of poverty and hunger, which many of our member states will have to contend with as a result of the economic carnage of COVID. Clearly, that is one area which we could cooperate and to ensure that we become a little more self-sufficient, resilient. So post-pandemic, I believe, and even at this point, starting from now, I believe those are areas that should be given some of priority so that we know that, you know, the international trade, that we are not as vulnerable as COVID would have response. There has to be a strong of global solidarity or to encourage greatness of global solidarity. Because in essence, what we're seeing now is unilateralism by various countries looking after their own affairs and literally undermining the level of global solidarity that is needed to fight COVID. So we also, for example, and hopefully part of one of the decisions of the communique is for ALBA to start the, let's say, the advocacy for a universal vaccine, because I have suspect that will be one of the challenges that we'll be faced with, not only ALBA countries, but developing countries globally. You may find that there is likely to be a vaccine war, because in the first instance, there will be a limited production of vaccines. And I have suspect that those countries that would have spent a significant amount of monies to develop these vaccines, that they will prioritize their people, and that they will put the rest of us at risk. So I believe that there should be increased advocacy led by ALBA for there to be a universal access to vaccines, so that if or when these vaccines become available, that they will be made available to all populations, all countries globally, recognizing that we are as strong as our weakest link, and that if they're going to make certain developing countries vulnerable, then obviously they're making the entire world or the entire globe vulnerable. So I think that is one of the areas that I would like us to focus on and to have increased advocacy coming out of ALBA, and to get others, especially developing countries, to join us to push for a universal vaccine or universal access to a vaccine. So again, as I said before, we need to share resources, share expertise, share experience, even in terms of reopening our economies. Antigua and Barbuda has gone ahead to open our economy to international flights, and the protocols that we've established, not only here in Antigua but in the broader CARICOM, we should be able to share those protocols with other ALBA members, so as they reopen their borders, that they can share from our experience. I mean, this is absolutely critical. Now, I also want to suggest too that maybe we should establish an air bridge between ALBA countries, because when you look at the risk among ALBA countries, it's a similar risk based on the prevalence of COVID in our respective populations. So there could be an air bridge in which we can facilitate the movement of people among ALBA countries, recognizing that there is no increase in the risk. In fact, there's virtually an equalization of risk. Now, I'm of the view too that ALBA should seek to engage China as perhaps the closest country to the United States in terms of economic power, and clearly a developing world power, one that can help to bring some level of balance. I do not know that on our own, without allies, that we'll be able to deal with the challenges that the imperialists will pose to various ALBA countries. And let's face it, you can see that, generally speaking, they're trying to literally undermine all of us. You would have seen what happened in Venezuela and Cuba with the sanctions. More recently in Dominica, you would have seen that they actually tried to intervene and to influence the result of the last general elections and undermine Prime Minister Skerritt. And one second, colleagues, can you just unplug that? I have to say that in St. Vincent and Grenadines, that they will be making similar interventions. In fact, recently in Antigua, I was told by the U.S. ambassador to the OECS that is stationed in Barbados, or who is stationed in Barbados, that the U.S. government recently made a decision that they will discontinue assistance to our defense force on the basis that there's a long-standing unpaid debt dating back over 50 years for Deepwater Harbor when Antigua and Barbuda was a colony. So you can see that they are looking for possibly every reason to try and undermine us, and that is a reason to why we have to stand in solidarity with each other, recognizing that COVID would have made us more vulnerable economically, socially, and the imperialists, obviously, when they recognize that level of vulnerability, they will want to move in and to exploit us. So we have to stand together and also to get additional allies. So maybe we could the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela may want to seek to engage China and even Russia a little closer in increasing your production of oil with PDVSA so that you can earn more revenues, and perhaps too that's a way in which you can assist other ALBA countries on the basis that you're able to increase your production. So if there's any way that they can assist you through probably joint investments or maybe loans to develop your capacity, we think that those opportunities should be explored so that you can obviously increase your revenues, especially at this time when you require revenues to respond to COVID. And I'm also of the view too that ALBA should approach China, the People's Republic of China collectively. And I do know that we have a couple of members that are aligned with Taiwan, but at this point, it does not matter. We should be approaching China to provide some form of stimulus funding for the ALBA countries. And I say this in the context that the international financial institutions have not been assisting us. In fact, the assistance that we've had would have been a paltry amount of money. I mean, I believe, for example, that Dominica would have gotten a paltry 14 million US dollar facility. I do not know that that would be sufficient to respond to the Dominican economy. In the case of Antigua and Barbuda, even though we lost 70% of our economy as a consequence of the closure of tourism and 70% of our revenue, we have not gotten a single cent from the IFIs, from the international financial institutions. We've not gotten a cent from the World Bank. We've not gotten a cent from the IMF. So clearly, they are squeezing us. And, you know, we need allies that we can rely upon. And I believe that having that level of cooperation with China help to, you know, make us less vulnerable, and perhaps is an avenue in which we can raise much needed resources in order to stimulate our economies. I mean, it's very, very important. So I'd like us to pursue that and to invite China to be part of to have a special forum, an ALBA China forum, in which we could have some level of cooperation. Now, I'm also of the view that we should be utilizing technology to create opportunities within ALBA. So for example, we could have a virtual trading platform within ALBA to support the development of digital business. And not only for investors within the ALBA countries, but also to invite even foreign investors outside of the ALBA region in other countries. I mean, investors in China, in let's say in Russia, and other countries that would really like to work with us and to invest in our countries. I like to see us look at that possibility of establishing some virtual trading platform in which we can attract more digital business to our respective economies or with the ALBA group of countries. So clearly, Mr. President, we have a significant amount of work to do. This is not a time for us to become daunted or, you know, to panic because of the difficulties, but for us to ensure that we rely on every ounce of resilience and to, of course, stick together as a common group to continue to operate in solidarity and perhaps have more regular meetings as well to exchange ideas and for us to understand the difficulty that countries within the group are experiencing and to look at ways in which we can help them. So some of us may not have resources. In fact, all of us have a common problem. We have limited resources. Many of us have very high debt ratios and high debt service ratios. These are things that make us extremely vulnerable. But at the same time, I believe, as I said before, in the area of sharing experience and, you know, sharing expertise, those are certain areas in which we can collaborate and help to reduce our vulnerability, to make our countries more sustainable, and ultimately to fight these challenges that are presented by COVID and those who are seeking to exploit COVID in order to make life more difficult for our respective governments. So again, I just want to thank you very much. And if I may have let's say, repeated anything that was said before. That is because of a very poor bandwidth that I had here, which I believe is now sorted, and I would have missed most of the presentation, so my apologies. But in any case, let us continue to stand together, and I give a firm commitment of Antigua and Barbuda that we will continue to stand with all of our colleague member states within ALBA, especially the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and Cuba, and we continue to stand against the excesses, the punitive actions that are taken by the United States in particular against their countries in which they're seeking to plunge your people into abject poverty and lead to countries ungovernable. We stand against those excesses, and as they continue to increase their rhetoric going into the presidential elections and may seek to provoke maybe some form of military action, we will continue to stand up interference in the domestic affairs of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and the Republic of Cuba. So you can be assured that Antigua and Barbuda will remain as a reliable partner to all of the member countries within ALBA, and that we stand ready to advocate on any issue that is in the best interest of ALBA countries. And again, we stand in solidarity to use our expertise to come with ideas as to how we can mitigate against the various risks and certainly the challenges created by COVID. So thank you very much, Mr. President.
Gaston Brown. Thank you very much, my friend. Soon we will meet again.
Gaston Brown.
Thank you. Thank you, Gaston
My
Brown.
friend, thank you very much.
All of our
Pronto
governments
nos
are
veremos.
taking
Gracias
notes.
a Gaston
Our
Brown.
foreign ministers, our
Bueno,
economy ministers are
creo
taking note
que
of all this exchange.
los
in order
gobiernos
to
toman nota, nuestros cancilleres
take
y
note of all
nuestros
the
ministros de
proposals that have
economía
been made so far,
para viabilizar, querido
proposals in the sense of
presidentes,
supporting tourism, strengthening
y cómo
China
la
ALBA
política exterior de los
alliance,
países del ALBA puede llevarla
and
adelante.
how
Hay que
our
armonizar
foreign policy
posiciones
in the other
y
countries
una propuesta
can
que
put
considero
forward all these agendas.
esencial, vital,
And there is also
y
a
la pongo
proposal
sobre la
that
mesa
I think is crucial,
para su
and I
implementación
put it on the
inmediata por
table
nuestros
for
organismos
it to
rectores de
be
salud.
immediately
La vacuna
implemented
contra
by
el
our
coronavirus.
world systems. The
La
need
vacuna
for
ALBA contra el
the
coronavirus.
vaccine for
Asumir
coronavirus,
el tema
the
de la
ALBA
vacuna y de los
vaccine
tratamientos contra
for
el coronavirus como prioridad
coronavirus, to take
de
up
este Consejo
this as a
Presidencial
priority. As a result of this Presidential Council of the Alliance, the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of America, that we give the vaccine the highest priority, and to work in our alliance along with the WHO, with China, with Russia, and with all the universities that are doing some research, so that we can move forward to make steps forward to guarantee the invention of the coronavirus vaccine, so that we can have immediate access to this vaccine, and so that we can distribute this vaccine to all the peoples of the ALBA region and the Caribbean and Latin American region, to guarantee our vaccine for our citizens. We have been doing some preliminary research. We have been looking at all the treatments that are being implemented around the world in close connection with the WHO. And I make this proposal so that our world systems, our scientists, our experts take up this responsibility, so that we can ensure our peoples, based on our unity, we can ensure our people tests and vaccines. We have been working very hard on this. ALBA is the only multilateral organization, association that has guaranteed tests to conduct different kinds of examinations, testing, and early diagnosis. And thanks to Cuba, we have been helping the whole world with the medical staff. The AOS had done nothing. Almagro has done nothing. The OAS has been totally useless in this juncture. The OAS has played no role whatsoever. This is useless. This is a useless organization. On the contrary, ALBA, we are moving forward together in unity, addressing our people's needs. Now, we will give the floor to Commander President of the Republic of Nicaragua, the son of Sandino, the great Daniel Ortega. Dear President, you have the floor. Thank you, dear brother, President Nicolás Maduro Moros. Greetings, all our affection and love to the heroic Bolivarian people, a people who is struggling today. They are leading a heroic battle in order to defend peace, solidarity, welfare of our peoples. Because ALBA was the result of an initiative made by Fidel and Hugo Chavez, two heroic commanders. ALBA was created to stand in solidarity with our peoples, to strengthen the economies of those peoples who would be ready to make efforts together and to complement each other. This was not an initiative thought merely to do business in spite of other peoples. This was not an initiative that was proposed to harm the world in any way. On the contrary, ALBA gave hope to all these peoples, gave welfare in the spheres of health, education, energy, in all spheres, and very flexible exchanges in the trade field. This is a project that is an example, that sets an example. And this is the reason why the empire has attacked ALBA. And no one doubts that today more than ever we are witnessing the true selfish essence, the enslaving essence of the empire. We know that there are many ways in which slavery can take form, but we see today the true colors of this savage capitalism, which has an enslaving essence. Capitalism was thought to be the sole alternative to be imposed to the peoples of the world. And ALBA represented a hope against this threat. This is the reason why Venezuela has been attacked constantly, given its importance in the international arena, against Cuba, against all of our peoples. All the peoples that we've heard today, our friend Robes Gonçalves, Prime Minister of San Vincent and the Grenadines, our brother Gaston Brown, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Roosevelt Skerrit, and when we listen to all our brothers from these countries, countries that have a small territory with a small number of inhabitants, that with tremendous effort have been struggling in the ALBA framework, such as the San Vincent and the Grenadines, such as Antigua and Barbuda, such as Dominica, and such as Grenada. Well, we have seen the strength, the dignity in their fight. However small the country, that country can have the strength and the dignity to face all the challenges. And this is a struggle that they have been waging. And today, under these circumstances, in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic, we can see very clearly the true nature of capitalism, the savage capitalism, capitalism that had been experiencing contradictions, rivalries, and hegemonic contradictions. But they had a common stance. They were putting in place their own strategies in the economic, military, commercial fields. And who would have thought, who would have imagined that these countries, developed countries, economic powers, countries that felt invincible. Who would have imagined that the lack of sensitiveness would be so evident? The lack of respect for the human rights, the lack of respect of their own citizens. This pandemic revealed all of this. We see clearly today that countries that should have first-class health systems at the service of their peoples are not sufficient or were not totally put at the service of their peoples. And in the face of a pandemic like this one that we are facing, they were lacking medical supplies, they were lacking beds, they were lacking facilities. And in spite of all the science and the development made in scientific fields, these countries looked pretty much like underdeveloped countries, like developing countries. Of course, they have managed to accumulate capabilities, resources, huge economic resources to resort to in order to alleviate the social economic impact of the pandemic. However, they have not been entirely successful in providing health care to their citizens. And why? Because it is true that they have many hospitals, but most of them are private hospitals. And they lacked of a public health system ready to face a pandemic like the one posed by COVID-19. So it's it's understandable that the situation in developing countries would be more difficult. And why? Because most of the developing countries have been forced to adopt the neoliberal model, and they have been forced to privatize their health systems. However, we see how countries like Cuba, like Venezuela and Nicaragua, who have limited resources, were able to double and triple the medical centers, the hospitals. Ever since 2007, actually, when we came back to the power, to our functions, we have been inaugurating hospitals and medical centers. We did not stop in our efforts to improve food production. And why? Because, as we have said it before here, very clearly, the impact on the economic and the social spheres of COVID-19 is severe indeed. Of course, that it has a very huge impact on all of us. But in ALBA we work on the basis of solidarity, and we believe in offering free health care services, free education to our peoples. So we have at our disposal very powerful tools in order to face these huge challenges, because without any doubt, it is only through solidarity, it is only through common efforts that we will be able to wage this battle. And it is very clear that the economic crisis produced by the structural deficiencies of this capitalism, Soviet capitalism, that was not prepared to face this COVID-19 pandemic. Neither did they have the initiative to unite their forces. They practiced a policy in which they were to save themselves and not pay solidarity to others. And most economies have been severely hit by COVID-19, and COVID-19 is affecting trade in a very bad manner. So this meeting proposed by President Nicolas Maduro is very timely indeed, very timely to continue working in the fields that we had already began our work, and to make some steps forward. What Nicolas proposed to set up a work group within ALBA so that we can start doing some research for our own vaccine, to start looking for the medical supplies to face this kind of pandemics. And at the same time, to face all the challenges in front of us in terms of trade, exchange, economy, all the essential aspects that will allow us to overcome the present juncture. The economic meltdown is going to hit severely our peoples, our countries, especially the countries with less resources and the most vulnerable populations. So our solidarity goes with the Venezuelan people. That in spite of the aggressive attacks, in spite of this double down in the midst of this pandemic, the United States have intensified their attacks. They have violated the human rights of the Venezuelan people. They have prevented transport of fuel from getting to Venezuela. They have sanctioned companies that are lending their ships to conduct these negotiations and operations. Well, all those actions are terrorist actions, crimes against humanity. Why? Because one should wonder, is that fuel that is going to be delivered to Venezuela is going to be only for Nicolas Maduro to use? No. That fuel is going to be put at the service of the Venezuelan people. And Venezuela, thanks to Nicolas Maduro, and thanks to Iran also, have been able of ensuring fuel to the Venezuelan people, fuel that is pretty much needed by the Venezuelan population. And what the U.S. administration is trying to do is to steal this fuel from the Venezuelan people. And they are trying to subdue the people, to starve the population, to kill all kind of commercial trade transport activities, transport that is needed by workers, by students, by nurses. So these are terrorist actions, criminal actions committed by the U.S. administration in the midst of this pandemic. So these are atrocious acts, brutal acts, and intensifying the sanctions against Cuba as well. Intensifying sanctions constantly. And in doing so, they are accomplices of the attempt, the terrorist attack against the Cuban embassy. They have not called for an investigation yet. And all the actions that have taken against Cuba to strengthen even more the economic blockade. So, without any doubt, these are criminal actions. Against Nicaragua, of course, they have attacked us many times with what they call sanctions. Sanctions that are nothing but attacks to stifle our economy. They have become experts in stifling our countries. They want to kill us, stifling us. And they want also to stifle our people. But our peoples have a long history of struggles, battles against colonialism, a long history of battles against expansionism, U.S. expansionism, a long history of struggles against coup d'etats that were concocted, organized by North American rulers. A very long history that shows clearly that our peoples will never be surrendered. Never. We will never surrender. We will never be sold to anybody. All of our affection to our brothers and sisters of ALBA, and as we also want to pay our respects to all the families that have lost their loved ones to the pandemic or to other causes. In these crucial times in which the international community is witnessing a very difficult moment. To all of the ALBA family, to all of the Latin American and Caribbean families, and to all the families in the United States and Canada, to all the families of England, of the European Union, to all the families that in Asia and in Africa, Oceania, and the whole planet have lost their loved ones to COVID-19 or due to other diseases, accidents, crimes committed against social progressive causes. For all of them, we stand in solidarity and we look forward to the future. And rest assured that in ALBA, that in Latin America and the Caribbean, and that in the whole world, there is a sun that will always shine in our skies, and this sun is our peoples who will struggle forever for their freedom. So be it, my dear President. Celia is here with me, and we always remember the small restaurant where we once visited in Nicaragua. We always remember that special time when we had dinner together, and we tried this wonderful dish in Nicaragua, gallo pinto, which is called, I think this is called the dish in Nicaragua. And I look forward to the day we will be going once again to Nicaragua to have this special dish which is called gallo pinto in Managua. Thank you very much. The President, Daniel Ortega, was explaining to the world some very interesting facts. The capitalist developed world has been the epicenter of coronavirus, has been the epicenter of the world crisis, and the United States became the epicenter of coronavirus 2 months ago. And the United States, who possess nuclear bombs, missiles, who have invaded countries, bombarded countries, they have not found a way to protect their people. So these are undeniable facts that we show to the world. The United States, as we speak, have recorded 44,000 new cases and 820 dead. So far, the United States has more than 2,200,000 cases of coronavirus. And we're talking about the first power of the world. How Trump says, they say that America, they are always first, they are winners, but they are winners in coronavirus. And American people are dying on the streets, 40 million of unemployed, and now they have all these protests against racism. And we have circulated today a communique to stand in solidarity with the family of George Floyd, to stand in solidarity with the United States people in their fight against supremacists and against the oppression of the police. So all of our solidarity goes to the United States people. And the epicenter of coronavirus in Latin America is Brazil, as Daniel Ortega has just said. And all those places where neoliberalism prevails, they have been encountering very severe conditions because there is a lack of social welfare in all those countries. Brazil, we can see what is happening in Brazil. Today they have more than 5,000 new cases, 204 deaths. The tribunal of Brazil forced Bolsonaro to publish figures on a daily basis because Bolsonaro had decided not to tell the people the truth about the figures. So far, Brazil has reached 747,000 cases of coronavirus. Brazil is the world epicenter and the Latin American epicenter, and more than 38,000 deaths. We ask the Lord all the blessings for the Brazilian people, all our solidarity to Brazil. And there are other cases like Ecuador, Chile, and Colombia. So these are countries where they have the neoliberalism system, and there you go. We have a special guest, a leader, a warrior, the son of Tapari, the Indian chief of the South, Evo Morales Aima. You have the floor, dear brother.
Thank you very much, Brother Maduro, Brother President, foreign ministers, and all the economy teams of the countries of ALBA TCP. It is a great honor to be here with you, to hear you, to see you through this video conference. And as usual, the different statements of the brother presidents that give us hope. It is a commitment with other peoples which are poor in Latin America and in the world. We expect to be part of ALBA and to be backing ALBA. For now, we are not part of ALBA. I would like to tell you that our responsibility with ALBA is how to guarantee, how to provide, how to protect national elections which are scheduled for September the 6th. But brothers and sisters, you must know that the line of US politics and the racist right wing, they do not want elections. They want to delay elections in an indefinite manner. They even want to eliminate the 1994 constitution through a decree and go back to the colonial state and leave to aside our plurinational state. And that's the goal, the US goal. And that Mas cannot go back to the government, and Evo cannot go back to being the president. And they are organized, and we are trying to organize to guarantee national elections. I salute and I commend the different statements and how to overcome the COVID-19. I commend the guidelines. I think that we have to discuss in a joint manner what we do with the debt. If it's not annulment, I would say for Bolivia how to reschedule and defer payment of the external debt. But I also understand how our economic teams for now in Bolivia, our comrades from the medium class entrepreneurs are working to be prepared and relaunch our economy. But in addition to the economic situation, I would like to inform you that in Bolivia they have started to privatize. They stopped all the works that we built and that were being built. They stopped all the public enterprises. That's why the Bolivian people is disappointed of the de facto government. But it is also important to consider the health issue. I think you have a lot of experience, foreign ministers, presidents. It is important to launch an international campaign that life cannot be a merchandise. For using the experience of the Cuban and Venezuelan brothers and sisters, we can guarantee a life. We, we are not like in Brazil. I share the views of the different brothers. They call it the world, a world power, that, but this country has not been a power. What I read and I was informed about the IMF that it said that the policies of the New World Order is important to have a reduction of the unnecessary population. And what's the unnecessary population? The elderly, which are a burden for the state, the handicapped, and mainly poor people. So who's dying in the United States massively? Maybe this is part of a war, a biological war. And from ALBA TCP, it would be important to launch an international campaign in order to work on the issue of life. How the states or the World Health Organization work, work on research, because private companies or transnationals cannot be working only in the scientific research. We have a lot of responsibilities. I commend your presence. Thank you, Brother Maduro, for your invitation. After hearing you and seeing you through the screen, I feel stronger, and from here I accompany the Brother David to go back with this revolution in Bolivia. I would like to thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the support of the movements in social movements in Bolivia. We are going to keep in touch in order to go back, and I would like to tell you that we will go back and we will return dignity to our people. Thank you very much. We will go back and we will become millions. Ayaya Bolivia, Ayaya Huipala, Ayaya Evo Morales Aima. We're very pleased to see you good, strong, and fighting. We're very happy to see you at the forefront of that courageous people that will know how to find the path for the upcoming victories. It is a long way from the Bolivar indigenous resistance from always, and the future belongs to us. Thank you, Evo Morales. We have an important presentation. It's Vijay Prasad, a U.S. citizen who was born in India, Calcutta, a professor of international studies in Connecticut in the United States. Between 2013 and 2014, he worked in the University of Beirut. He's a main correspondent of Global Throtter, and he's currently executive director of the Tricontinental Social Research Institution and chief of the chef goal. It is an important presentation from a young man from the United States, knowing that in the United States everything is moving and a new world is being born, thanks to the mobilization of millions of people from the US. It is an awakening, and long live the United States. So we're going to listen to this presentation of Vijay Prasad.
Agenda for the developing world after COVID-19. In 1974, the UN General Assembly passed a new international economic order which was driven by the Non-Aligned Movement, or NAM. It laid out a clear plan for the structural transformation of the world system, which was in the throes of a crisis and would be forced into a neoliberal direction. This neoliberal orientation furthered the crisis and brought us to this cul-de-sac of human possibilities. It is for this reason that the developing countries need to craft as clear an alternative to the capitalist path. The 10-point agenda developed by Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, presented here, builds upon the 1974 New International Economic Order and is in the spirit of the International Humanitarian Fund as envisioned by President Hugo Chavez. We hope that ALBA could promote this agenda within the NAM and return to the UN General Assembly for a new resolution on the International Economic Order. Point 1, tackle the global pandemic. Our priority is to tackle the global pandemic. To this end, enhancing public sector production towards masks, protective equipment, ventilators, field hospitals, and tests for the entire population must be central, as it already is in Vietnam and in Venezuela. Establish worker control over the conditions of work so that workers who are best placed to make these decisions could provide a hygienic work environment. In the absence of adequate public action, governments need to create work plans to hire people for projects to break the chain of infection and to ensure that people are fed, clothed, and in health. Such public action could learn from the cooperatives in Kerala in India and the committees to defend the revolution in Cuba. The workforce in shuttered sectors such as tourism should be immediately hired into jobs that would counter the pandemic. Point 2, medical solidarity. A united front of developing countries must reject the International Monetary Fund and creditor-driven limit placed on government sector salaries. Because of these limits, developing countries have been losing medical personnel to the North Atlantic states. States must use their precious resources to enhance public medical education and train medical workers within communities to provide public health services. ALBA's medical internationalism, with the Cuban brigades in the lead, must become a model for the world through the World Health Organization. Cuban medical internationalism alongside Chinese medical internationalism would play a key role as the United States departs from the WHO. The entire private health sector must be nationalized, and smaller medical centers need to be created so that people can easily access public health facilities. Governments must withdraw from public insurance for private health care. In other words, no more public subsidy for private health care. Public health systems must be strengthened, including production of medical equipment and medicines and the distribution of essential medicines whose prices must be controlled by regulations. Point 3, intellectual commons. Developing countries must push for a reconsideration of the TRIPS, or trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, which provides unrestrained property rights on goods that must be part of the global commons. This applies directly to the COVID-19 vaccine, which must be offered for production in countries without consideration. But it applies equally to any pharmaceutical drugs, many of them publicly financed, and it must apply to energy technologies that would swiftly move us from fossil to renewable fuels, as well as to communication technologies such as 5G. In the short term, developing countries must enhance mechanisms for science and technology transfer amongst themselves. Point 4, cancellation of debt. Reasonable estimates suggest that the developing countries owe 11 trillion US dollars in external debt, with debt service for this year alone estimated to be 3.9 trillion US dollars. With the coronavirus recession, such payments are unthinkable. Debt relief must go beyond the 47 least developing countries and include all developing countries. This relief must not be only postponement, but it must be for debt cancellation from both public and private creditors. An international alliance must be formed on a broad front to pressure creditors to cancel the debt so that all resources that go to service the debt can be channeled fully toward the dire needs of society. Point 5, food solidarity. Half of the world's population struggles with hunger. Food sovereignty and food solidarity are essential antidotes, as has been shown by platforms such as Via Campesina. As far as is possible, corporate control over agriculture needs to be challenged, and food production needs to be made into a human rights priority. Funds need to be marshaled towards enhancing production of food. These funds need to be spent on infrastructure for agrarian production, including for enhancement of such projects as the ALBA Seed Bank. Universal public distribution systems need to be strengthened to provide higher incomes for farmers and to ensure distribution of food to the people. A more robust rural landscape will decongest cities and draw people to live meaningful lives in rural areas. Point 6, enhance the public. The corona shock has shown that the private sector is simply not capable of addressing emergencies, let alone human needs. Developing countries need to lead by offering a robust defense of the public sector, not only for production of key goods and services, medical and food for instance, but for anything that is essential for modern life. More public housing, more public transportation, more public Wi-Fi, and more public education. To allow the profit sector to commodify these parts of human life has eroded our capacity to build a civilized society. Point 7, wealth taxes. Currently, roughly 32 trillion US dollars is sitting in offshore tax havens, and untold amounts of money are simply not counted towards taxation. Two things are necessary. First, that illicit financial flows must be recovered. And second, that wealth taxes are properly imposed on the upper echelons of the bourgeoisie and the land-owning wealthy, as well as financiers and those engaged in financial speculation. These funds would be enough to redirect priorities to eliminate poverty, hunger, illiteracy, homelessness, and indignity. Point number 8, capital controls. Without capital controls, a country has no effective economic sovereignty. Developing countries must create an international platform that binds each of them to undertake capital controls. This is a political issue that cannot be implemented by a single country. Capital controls are measures taken by a government to regulate the flow of finances into and out of a country. Such controls include transaction taxes, minimum stay requirements, and caps on the amount of currency that can move across borders. Capital controls and democratic control over the central bank will prevent capital flight and should give governments sovereignty over their currency and their economy. Point 9, non-dollar regional trade. De-dollarization is an essential part of a new agenda. 60% of the world's reserves are held in dollars, and world commerce is largely conducted in US dollars. The dollar Wall Street complex has a near stranglehold on international finance and trade. It is no surprise that US unilateral sanctions can have a catastrophic impact on countries, not because they rely upon the US dollar, but because their trading partners are enmeshed in it. The dollar, the US dollar, has become a weapon to undermine development. Experimental alternative payment systems like the Sucre need to be dusted off, and new global financial institutions need to be created to facilitate wire transfers. In the short run, this could be a non-dollar regional facility, although there is a need for global institutions that set aside the immense advantage provided to the United States by the dollar being used as a global currency. Relatedly, there is a need to strengthen regional trade blocs that would honor barter as a mechanism for payment. Point 10, centralized planning, decentralized life. The pandemic has shown us the power of central planning and the importance of decentralized public action. Economies that are not allowed to plan their use of resources floundered before the virus. It needs to establish participatory central planning mechanisms on an ever-increasing scale to recast social production more toward need than toward profit. These plans must be derived from maximum democratic input and should be transparent to the public. Central planning would enable the nationalization of sectors such as mining, including energy production, plantation production, food processing, and tourism. These would be placed under worker control into cooperatives. It would be an instrument to minimize waste, including profligate military expenditures. Enhancement of local self-government and cooperatives, as well as of associations and unions of the people, will allow social life to become increasingly democratic. On behalf of Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, thank you very much for your time.
Gracias a Vijay Prachat. Gracias. Vijay Prachat. Vijay Prachat. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Vijay Prachat. Bueno, estamos siguiendo con interés el despertar, la primavera del pueblo de Estados Unidos, su despertar antirracista, su despertar contra la brutalidad policial. Y esa brutalidad policial no es otra cosa que la brutalidad de un Estado autoritario, represivo, que persigue durante décadas al pueblo de Estados Unidos.
Ferocious administration that has persecuted the people of the United States. Towards other countries, they have always attacked peoples with bombardments, with invasions, like in Syria, Vietnam. And towards their own population, they attack their own people. The surprise they feel against the poor, the Latin American people, the abandonment of the 40 million people in the United States with no health, with no housing, with no social welfare. And the United States people are witnessing, are experiencing an awakening. And I have no doubts that the world will be different. And at the front form, we will have ALBA with our banners inspired by Bolivar, Martí, Sandino, Fidel, and Chavez, inspired by our Jesus Christ, inspired also by the commander of commanders, as Hugo Chavez used to say when he was talking about Jesus Christ. So we have just listened to this 10-point agenda that is going to be distributed in all the languages by our special guest, Prachad, which he explained in detail. And we propose also a meeting for the political, the economic and political council. The date would be June 29, so that we can celebrate the 15th anniversary of Petrocaribe. So you are all invited, and we will see then all the proposals which we are going to start working today, proposed by Bisset Prashad. Now we will give the floor to the Foreign Minister of our sisterly nation of Grenada, Peter Davis, best known in Latin America like Pedro David. You have the floor, sir. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to see you again and a pleasure to be speaking to you, but it would be more of a pleasure if I were in Caracas, but that will be resumed soon, hopefully. President of Cuba, my brother Diaz-Canel, Prime Minister Gonzalez, Prime Minister Skerrit, Prime Minister Brown, President Ortega, Comrade Evo, all of the distinguished delegates here today, a very good afternoon. It is an honor to address this meeting on behalf of the government and people of Grenada. I am particularly pleased with and must acclaim the fraternal ties between Grenada and Venezuela and the member countries of ALBA TCP. I wish to express my thanks to the government and the people of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela for their efforts in hosting this important meeting, even while our world is still plagued by the pandemic of COVID-19. We would like to express our immense gratitude to the governments of Venezuela, Cuba, and China for their extraordinary assistance to our country in securing and donating much-needed equipment and personnel for fighting COVID-19. They have done so in spite of their own challenges, and for that, we also salute the efforts of the World Health Organization and the Pan American Health Organization for their assistance to Grenada and for the Caribbean in general. Grenada is pleased on this special occasion to reaffirm our commitment to the core principles of ALBA TCP and wish to assure all member states of our support in working to combat this dreaded disease. We are meeting at a time in which this pandemic presents us with a wide scope of challenges that call for new and innovative approaches. There is need to strengthen our movement, the imperatives of solidarity and in order to tackle against COVID-19. It is that strength of cooperation and solidarity that will enable us to surmount not only the health challenges of COVID-19, but also the economic shortfalls that will plague us in its wake. That same collective strength will help us in the delivery of the economic, social, and political benefits that our people expect and certainly deserve. We wish to reaffirm our commitment to the Caribbean region as a zone of peace and note with concern the disheartening moves on the part of some countries to alter this noble desire. In this light, we to Cuba and the return of Guantanamo to Cuba. Comrades, we also called for the removal of the unjust and illegal sanctions against the people of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. The ALBA TCP grouping has been good for Grenada, and we will continue to stand in solidarity with our fellow members. Grenada has benefited from the range of assistance given by ALBA TCP in the economic and social benefits throughout the years. As I mentioned earlier, in this time of COVID-19, Grenada has already received critical support from Venezuela in materials and equipment, and Cuba deployed a medical mission to assist us, like they have done for regions all across the world. For this, we are eternally grateful. As a developing state, our foreign policy is an essential asset as we pursue development through the conscious effort of our nation, people, friends, and allies. Excellencies, COVID-19 is a global health crisis that has rapidly developed into a severe economic and financial crisis for us. Like many nations, we have faced enormous financial challenges with the need for testing, tracing, isolation, and treatment, and the total lockdown to contain the spread of the virus. We have had to provide support for the most vulnerable sections of our population, especially many of our people working in the informal economy who lost their livelihoods or at least suffered through a suspension of their livelihoods as a result of COVID-19. In addition, we had to mobilize resources to deal with adequate responses and recovery measures for our economy. We understand and appreciate the urgent need for collective action in this challenging and unprecedented period. We therefore wish to make a general call for goodwill, solidarity, dialogue, and creative and decisive actions to stem this crisis. As such, we must draw up and implement a bold crisis response package and a roadmap. Our specific actions must address health issues which are critical to economic recovery and stability. The initiatives and recommendations adopted here today must address the imperatives of this crisis. In this context, comrades, and in the context of our common ambition, we must agree on potential areas of action. These actions must treatment and vaccines are accessible to all. Exploring new ways to enhance collaboration among the members of ALBA in order to restart our economies. We must also focus on making public investments in health and education systems, physical infrastructure, social protections, and the expansion of social services which bolster productive employment and productive sustainable growth, given how much the effects of COVID-19 have been felt by our most vulnerable. We must also focus on promoting science and technology to not only help in the prevention and treatment of this virus, but also in bringing it closer to industries that support the health sector. Additionally, attention must be given to trade among members of this august body, services among our member states. In addition, comrades, greater collaboration and promotion of ALBA initiatives and capacity building must be undertaken to create outlets for coordination and cooperation among our member countries. We must recognize that our cooperation and solidarity is an opportunity to achieve the sustainable future we want for our peoples. COVID-19 has demonstrated the value of solidarity in our organization. It is only through working together in the fierce urgency of now that we will contain the spread of the virus and temper the impact on our most vulnerable. Comrades, lives are at stake. As we conclude this meeting this afternoon, we must recognize the commitment, hard work, and dedication that have contributed to the growth of our organization. However, the task ahead is to strengthen the implementation of our initiatives in order to reach the goals we have set for ourselves. We must move resolutely to strengthen partners and embark on outreach for more active involvement of youth and women in our movement and the deepening of our people-to-people ties. In closing, we commit to our common ties in the promotion of sustainable development, solidarity, equality, tolerance, and respect for all. From our chairman, excellencies, distinguished delegates, I thank you.
Saludo al primer ministro y a todo el pueblo
Greetings to all the people of Grenada.
intercambio fructífero de propuestas.
During this very fruitful exchange of proposals that are going to nourish the debate on the public policies that we are deciding upon in real time. This has been a very positive meeting. This is a special meeting. We have taken note of all the proposals in the economic, financial, health spheres. There is a number of commitments, of common commitments of all the countries in ALBA, and we know that all the commitments to which we engage ourselves are also commitments with PetroCaribe, which involves 18 countries, and we know very well that our actions also reach the member countries of CELAC, 33 countries. So one motor, there is a driving another and another. So the ALBA motor is driving our region. We are very much alive and kicking. And PetroCaribe also will be celebrating its 15th anniversary, as well as CELAC. All of us together, building together, resisting the attacks of the right with a pro-Yankee right, the guerrilla right. Once Foreign Minister Patiño told me when he was the foreign minister, he held a meeting in Quito in the presidential palace, and they offered a dinner to the incoming foreign minister of PPK, Kaczynski. Do you remember him? He started attacking us and he failed. So, well, he was telling me that they were having a conversation during dinner, and he told Patiño, "You are wrong. You are wrong. We are not in favor of the empire." And Patiño raised his glass and he said, "Okay, so let's drink to that." Very well, I'm very happy to hear that. And President Correa was there, and they all were very happy of that. And the PPK minister said, "We are not in favor of the Yankees." He said to him, "We are Yankees." This is what he actually said. So, oh my goodness, this is the right that we have in our countries. The right who has always been subjected in a very vulgar manner to the empire. And we know this very well because we have been facing this right for long, and we have beaten them in many occasions. In Latin America, this is also going to be the case, and I know that we will have a very strong comeback thanks to our integration project. We will now give the floor to the Prime Minister, Timothy Harris, and I'd like to ratify our appreciation and congratulations for the landslide victory of Timothy Harris on June the 5th. Congratulations to the people who once again prevailed in the midst of this pandemic, respecting the social distancing. So congratulations to the San Kitts and Nevis people, the people who took to the streets to vote, and they made their decision. And Timothy Harris has been ratified as the first Prime Minister of San Kitts and Nevis. So we are going to listen to his representative, Leonard Sidney Osborne. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Comrade Chairman, President Maduro, distinguished presidents and prime ministers, delegation heads, special guests, and our presenters today. My delegation, which consists of Ambassador Powell and myself, we're deeply honored to participate in this high-level ALBA TCP conference at which member states have been convened to discuss the future condition of our economies post-COVID-19. I must first apologize, as we mentioned before, for the absence of Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris, who last Friday won a resounding mandate from the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis at the polls. Indeed, our people have spoken loudly and clearly and have reposed their confidence in the Team Unity administration for a further 5 years. He has asked me to convey sincere thanks for the many congratulatory messages that he has received from his regional colleagues on this overwhelming victory. His absence today reflects the assembling of a new cabinet. No easy task, as there is representation from 3 political parties that make up the Team Unity movement. Our meeting today comes against the backdrop of a pandemic which does not recognize borders and which has impacted our region with devastating consequences for future economic growth. This is an opportune time to say how truly appreciative our government is to the government of the people of the Republic of Cuba, who have again demonstrated their commitment in providing specialist care for our citizens in the face of this pandemic. In times of need, in times of crisis, we in the Caribbean know that we have genuine friends, the Republic of Cuba and the Bolivarian Venezuelan Republic. I can say, just to give you a brief idea of what as the position is in St. Kitts and Nevis, we closed our borders early, which has resulted in a total of 15 cases with no deaths, and at present there are no COVID-19 cases in the Federation. Extensive testing, mandatory quarantine where necessary, and nightly curfews have been strictly adhered to. Kitts and Nevis. It's clear that our country was unknowingly prepared to meet the challenges presented by COVID-19. Our Prime Minister, Dr. Harris, has pledged to make St. Kitts and Nevis the best managed small island state in this hemisphere and also in the world. It is because of prudent fiscal management of the affairs of state that we have recorded surplus budgets for the 5 years in office, 2015 to 2019. It is because of this fiscal discipline that our government has been able to pay its civil servants 13 months' salary in each of the 4 years, 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. And today, they receive their full monthly salary. As we are in the hurricane season, the Eastern Caribbean countries could experience a double whammy of COVID-19 and a devastating hurricane, which would be put an added burden on our fragile economies. It's against this backdrop that St. Kitts and Nevis unveiled a $120 million homegrown COVID-19 economic stimulus package in March. Some benefits from the package are an additional $12 million to capitalize the severance payment fund, an additional $5 million to support the poverty alleviation program, which provides a monthly $500 to households earning less than $3,000 each month, an additional $16.9 million on top of the $62 million budgeted for health system, an income assistance fund up to $1,000 per person to support workers whose earnings have been affected by COVID-19, income assistance to self-employed persons who can show that they have been impacted by COVID-19. Provided $30 million in funding for mortgage loans. We've also removed the VAT and import duties for 6 months on specified hygienic items. We have reduced the corporate income tax rate from 33% to 25% from April to June 2020 for businesses that retain at least 75% of the employees. And we've also reduced by 50% the unincorporated business tax rate. This represents some elements of the stimulus package. As many would know, St. Kitts and Nevis achieved a milestone in 2018 and 2019 with the arrival of over 1 million cruise passengers in each of these 2 years. Given the present pandemic, our tourism industry has been severely impacted by the forced closure of our borders. Obviously, the revenue expected from tourist arrivals, both cruise and stopover visitors, has been drastically reduced. How then does a country provide for its citizenry under these adverse conditions? As I said before, we have just been successful in our return to office after the general election on Friday. And the Team Unity Manifesto, which is available online, TU Manifesto 2020, gives an indication of our proposed pathway to sustain economic stability and growth. It is a creature reflecting the reality of COVID-19. So how do we want to look at the future after COVID-19? One of the first things we say we want to do is to reprioritize and accelerate implementation of approved capital projects. New capital works will be implemented. Our housing program will be accelerated, thus providing additional employment. Secondly, making additional lands available for farming. This pandemic has alerted us that food security and food availability are important factors for survivability. Accordingly, we will accelerate our hydroponics program, where the emphasis will be on attracting young people to apply this modern technology, making more land available for livestock production. Fish farming will now be a new venture, again to attract our young people. We have the technical expertise on the island to aggressively move forward in creating a new class of entrepreneurs. And I can say also manufacturing will now assume a critical role to provide new good-paying jobs, especially souls. This new term, it is anticipated that at least 2 new industrial parks will be operational. I would say also that there's an exciting area for our students, and I'm not just talking about students in St. Kitts and Nevis, but students who make up this ALBA TCP. Students are young people in development of the ICT sector. St. Kitts and Nevis is a leader in this area, and it is expected that there will be expansion in this field. Our students are already involved in robotic technology, and we expect the technical expertise from our friendly countries and countries that we do business with, that we will continue to lead in this scientific phenomenon. As we navigate the future, with the effect of this pandemic can have on the economic development in our countries, and the real possibility of contraction in earlier growth projections, countries will have to be resilient and innovative in their approaches to sustainability and viability. The final program which I need to submit today is our Citizen by Investment program, which is the oldest in existence and is referred to as the Platinum Standard. Our program makes a significant contribution to our GDP. We will continue to be innovative with the required due diligence, making this program the most attractive to our clients. Our presence and participation at this conference reflects our genuine interest in our association with ALBA TCP and closely with member states in seeking to ensure that we continue to do right for all our people. St. Kitts and Nevis pledges its continuing commitment to the further strengthening of the ALBA TCP within our hemisphere. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Nuestros saludos cariñosos
Greetings
a el primer ministro Timothy
Prime Minister
Harris
Timothy Harris
y a
and
todo
to
el pueblo
all
de San Cristóbal
the people of St. Kitts
Nieves.
and Nevis.
Allí estuvimos
We went
hace
to St. Kitts
2
and Nevis 2
años.
years ago. Greetings to all of
Bueno,
you.
mis saludos.
And
Realmente
what's been said,
muy
very
importante
important indeed.
que
We need to persevere
nosotros
and the
perseveremos en el
unity,
camino de la
the
unión
unity of our peoples,
de los pueblos,
the unity among the
de los líderes, de los
of the
gobiernos,
Latin American
de
and
América
the
Latina y del Caribe.
Caribbean
El ALBA es
peoples.
vanguardia de la
ALBA
unión
is at the
de los
vanguard
pueblos de
of
América Latina y
unity
del Caribe.
in our region. ALBA has a doctrine, principles, leadership. It has strength. And ALBA is right. It has the necessary will and the necessary strength as well as a clear thinking. And we have a very wise guidance. And we go beyond the words. We take action and we combine our thinking, our actions, our principles. This is the only Latin American association organization that reaches out to our people with education, health, life. We have a brilliant history and we need to persevere. We need to be tenacious. As a coordinator of this conference, I took up the responsibility of taking note on behalf of all of us, taking note of all the proposals made by the governments. We're united here. All the proposals made by the participants, by Alicia Bárcenas, the Secretary of ECLAC, also the proposal made by the Tricontinental Institute, made by our special guest Eva Morales Aima, the Indian chief of the South. So we take note of all the proposals, and in 19 days, on June the 29th, the Political Council of ALBA and the Economic Council of ALBA will make the decisions that have been foreseen by the governments. And regarding the vaccine for coronavirus, the ALBA vaccine against coronavirus, in the field of the financing sector with the relaunching of the ALBA Bank. Also, in the relaunching of Petrocarib, we have committed ourselves to relaunching Petrocarib, and the reactivation also of Sucre. A proposal has been made. Petro is going to be the currency in Sucre, and we're going to evaluate this proposal to put it into place, to implement this idea. We are also going to look at all the tests and diagnosis material for coronavirus for all the countries of ALBA. So these are the proposals that have been made today. We take note of these proposals, and on June 29 we must have firm decisions already made by our governments so that we can move forward in our association, our alliance. And this is going to be put into place in the second semester of this year. And the next months are going to be decisive in our struggle against COVID-19, and also to build upon these agreements to achieve a new anti-liberal post-pandemic future. So greetings to all of you. Receive my affectionate greetings. Long live ALBA! Long live the heritage of our liberators! Long live the heritage of Fidel and Chavez! And to finish up this conference, we're going to give you a gift, a present, through Telesur and all the social TV networks, we are going to broadcast this conference where Ignacio Ramonet, the Spanish academic scholar, is going to tell us about the COVID-19. He's going to make a brilliant analysis. Long live the peoples of our America. We will prevail. Thank you very much. So we'll give the floor now to Ignacio Ramonet. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good afternoon. A special greeting to the President and all the participants. I would like to say that it is a great honor for me to participate in this conference, and I would like to share 2 or 3 thoughts on the post-pandemic economic situation. It is clear that the pandemic is only one phase of the general crisis. This crisis has 3 times, in my opinion. The health time, problems in terms of health, the COVID-19 pandemic, the economic time, with the economic consequences of the pandemic and the quarantine, and all the measures that have been implemented to fight against the pandemic, and the third time, which is the political and social time. Then there are 3 times: health, economic, and political social time. Elections, social movements in the United States, particularly, they are in the third time. They have the health crisis, the economic crisis with the massive unemployment, and the social crisis with this mass protest which is globalized beyond the borders of the United States due to racism problems in American society. This is what is happening at an international level. After the health issue, we are facing the economic issue, and this all specialists agree to say that this economic crisis will have and is having unknown dimensions so far, and probably similar to the crisis of 1929, the Great Depression. Particularly, there is a worldwide crisis in the 3 main poles of development of the world: China, Japan, South Korea, the developed countries of Asia, the European Union, the European countries, the United Kingdom, the European Development Region, and on the other hand, the United States and Canada and North America as countries mainly affected by the health crisis. First, with Asia, second Europe, then North America. And now the economic crisis faced in these 3 main development poles of the world. Accordingly, there is a supply crisis because for months factories have been closed in these countries. There hasn't been production, and also of course there is a demand crisis because billions of people have been confined in their homes in quarantine, and they still remain at home in many countries. Therefore there is a very deep reduction of consumption and demand. These supply and demand crises have never happened in the world as long as we can remember, except in less severe cases or during periods of war as the Second or First World War, though the crisis had not been global but only in the territories affected by war conflict. Currently there is the supply and demand crisis, and on the other hand this is causing a huge increase of unemployment. In the United States We're talking about between 30 and 40 million unemployed people. In many European countries, unemployment will reach high rates, 15%, 20%, and even 23%. For example, in Spain. At the same time, there is a crisis due to the GDP fall, which is collapsing in many countries. In the southern countries, what is the impact of this economic situation from my point of view? Essentially, for many countries, the three main areas of or sources of income collapse. What is the livelihood of the southern countries? Basically, agricultural, mining, soil or subsoil exports, and obviously these exports have collapsed because there hasn't been production. Second, remittances from migrants who come from southern countries and are working in the developed countries, whether in Europe or Africa, the United States or Canada, for the countries of South America, and evidently because of the increasing unemployment in these development poles, remittances are inevitably going to be reduced. In what proportion, we don't know, but they will be reduced. Thirdly, some southern countries live from tourism. Tourism is one of the most affected industries in this crisis because borders are closed and international transportation has ceased. Therefore, most southern countries' main resources, such as exports, remittances, and tourism, are reduced at this time. Likewise, southern countries' capitals have fled to the north when they noticed that this situation was going to take place. This issue has caused the currency collapse and the increase in price of imports in southern countries. Consequently, there is an unprecedented crisis, and many international organizations are also announcing an increase of unemployment, poverty, a collapse of production, and an increase of migration that may occur towards development poles, which are also facing a crisis. In the light of this situation, southern countries should join together to claim two things, in my opinion. On the one hand, debt cancellation. The foreign debt cannot be paid at this time. It must be cancelled, as Fidel Castro demanded for some time with great vision and clarity. The foreign debt is already paid by most of the countries, and therefore the northern countries must either cancel it or at least reduce it, or not to collect it by imposing a moratorium on collection for some years. In addition, it is obviously inhuman to keep unilateral coercive measures, the so-called sanctions, against southern countries, particularly Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Iran, Syria, etc. In these circumstances, there must also be a moratorium or at least a temporary suspension of the blockade against these countries. This should be a demand not only from southern countries, but an international demand. And accordingly, the Pope has made a statement towards this direction. It is extremely important to relaunch not only for this crisis, but for upcoming crises, relaunching the project of food sovereignty as promoted and defended by President Chavez And as President Fidel Castro insisted, it is important that countries have at least food sovereignty and not to depend on foreign countries for their food security, which is what people actually need, that they do not depend on foreign countries. It is important to be inspired by the example of Vietnam. After a long war in the 60s and the 70s, for more than 20 years, a war that destroyed most of the country, Vietnam has not only achieved food sovereignty but great export capacity. I think it is very important to develop this project. Finally, the ALBA countries should build and reinforce their alliance to establish more than ever links of mutual aid in terms of public health services, which have proven to be strong in this crisis, especially in Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, countries that have had the best results or are among the best results in Latin America and all over the world. And that this proves that consolidated public services can help in unprecedented crises such as this one. Thank you very much.
Buenas tardes, un saludo en particular a los presidentes, a todos los participantes.